A new house, a fresh start, walls that promise sanctuary and dreams yet to be painted. But what if those walls already harbor secrets? What if the previous occupants left behind more than just forgotten belongings? Welcome, new homeowners and seekers of the unsettling, to Nightmare True Horror. Tonight, we unlock the doors to 4 true stories, where the dream of a new home soured into a waking nightmare. What strange echoes have you found in your own new spaces? What unsettling discoveries have made your blood run cold? The comments below are a place to share those hidden anxieties. If the thought of peeling back the fresh paint to reveal the darkness beneath intrigues you, consider this your key to subscribe, for the tales we've unearthed tonight are deeply unsettling. And the final, most chilling revelation about what truly lurks within is a truth you'll want to stay for, to fully understand the terror of a home. The Victorian house on Elm Street was everything my wife Sarah and I had dreamed of. Original hardwood floors, bay windows, and enough character to justify the slightly below market price. We'd been house hunting in Portland for months, and when this 1920s gem became available, we jumped on it immediately. The realtor, Mrs. Patterson, had been apologetic about one small detail. The previous owners had left some junk in the attic that we'd need to clear out ourselves. On our second night in the house, as I lay in bed reviewing mortgage documents, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping from directly above our bedroom. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, pot, tap. The sound was too deliberate to be settling wood, too consistent to be random. It continued for nearly an hour, always the same pattern, as if someone was trying to communicate in code. Zara was already asleep beside me, exhausted from unpacking, so I tried to dismiss it as old house noises. But something about that rhythmic tapping felt purposeful, almost desperate. What could be making such a deliberate sound in what was supposed to be an empty attic? My name is David Chen, and I'm a 34-year-old software engineer who's always been drawn to logical explanations. Zara and I had saved for 3 years to afford this house in Portland's historic Irvington neighborhood. The previous owners, an elderly couple named the Hendersons, had lived here for over 40 years before moving to what Mrs. Patterson described as assisted living. The house inspection had been clean, and we'd gotten a good deal by agreeing to clear out the accumulated belongings ourselves. The tapping returned the following night. Same time, same pattern. This time I grabbed a flashlight and headed upstairs to investigate. The attic access was a narrow pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. As I climbed up, the musty smell of old wood and dust filled my nostrils, but underneath it was something else. Something sour and organic that made my stomach turn. The attic was larger than I'd expected, running the full length of the house. Piles of furniture covered in dusty sheets created a maze of shadows in my flashlight beam. But as I moved deeper into the space, I noticed something odd about the layout. The furniture wasn't randomly stored. It was deliberately arranged to create walls and pathways, almost like a maze designed to hide something at the far end. Following the makeshift corridor between furniture pieces, I reached the back corner of the attic. Behind a massive oak wardrobe, I found a section of newer drywall that didn't match the rest of the space. Someone had built a room within the room, painted to blend in but obviously different up close. That's when I found the door. Heavy wood with multiple deadbolts, all installed on the outside. The door was slightly ajar, and my flashlight beam revealed what lay beyond. My blood turned to ice. It was a small room, maybe 8 by 10 feet, with no windows and walls lined with gray acoustic foam, the kind used to block sound. The floor was bare plywood, stained dark in several places. Along one wall, hundreds of tally marks had been scratched into the drywall with what looked like fingernails, grouped in sets of 5 like a prisoner counting days. The marks stretched from floor to ceiling, covering nearly every inch of available wall space. In the center of the room sat a single mattress, filthy and torn, with restraint points bolted to the floor beside it. A bucket in the corner served as a makeshift toilet. The smell here was overwhelming. Human waste, fear, desperation. This wasn't storage. Someone hadn't stored junk up here. They had stored a person. I stumbled backward, my mind racing to process what I was seeing. The Hendersons had built a soundproof prison in their attic and held someone captive here. The tally marks suggested months, maybe years of imprisonment. But who and where were they now? My phone had no signal in the attic, so I climbed down quickly to call 911. But as I dialed, I heard Sarah scream from the front door. I ran to find her holding the manila envelope that had been slipped under our door. Inside were dozens of photographs, surveillance shots of us viewing the house, signing papers at closing, moving in our belongings. Someone had been watching us from the beginning. At the bottom of the envelope was a handwritten note. "Welcome to your new home. I'll be visiting soon to reclaim what's mine." The police arrived within minutes, but their investigation revealed something even more horrifying. The Hendersons hadn't moved to assisted living. They disappeared 6 months ago. The people who sold us the house were imposters using fake identities and forged documents. Detective Morrison explained that the real Hendersons had been running a human trafficking operation for over a decade, using the soundproof room to hold victims before transporting them elsewhere. When their operation was discovered by rivals, they'd been eliminated, and their house had been taken over by someone continuing their work. "The room you found shows evidence of recent use," Morrison said grimly. "We think they were holding someone there until very recently, possibly until you moved in." The forensics team found DNA evidence from at least 12 different individuals in that attic room. Hair samples, blood, fingernail scrapings from the tally marks. When they analyzed the tapping sounds I'd been hearing, the pattern matched Morse code, SOS repeated over and over. Someone had been in that room calling for help, possibly for years. The investigation revealed that the house had been the center of a trafficking network spanning 3 states, with victims held in the attic room for weeks or months before being moved to other locations. 3 people were eventually convicted in federal court, but the person who'd signed H on that note was never identified. We moved out immediately and never returned. The house sat empty for a year before being demolished. No one would buy it once the story broke. The property was eventually turned into a small park, but I still drive by sometimes, remembering that room and wondering about the people who'd been trapped there. The most haunting realization isn't that such places exist. It's that they're hidden in plain sight, in ordinary neighborhoods where ordinary people live their ordinary lives. The Hendersons had been respected community members, known for their quiet demeanor and well-maintained property. Their neighbors had no idea what was happening in the attic above their heads, and sometimes, late at night in our new house, I still hear that rhythmic tapping, not in reality, but in my memory, echoing with the desperation of people who try to communicate their suffering through walls designed to muffle their screams. Because the most terrifying truth I learned is that horror doesn't announce itself with creaking doors and flickering lights. It hides behind real estate listings and friendly neighbors, waiting patiently for the next unsuspecting family to discover what previous owners left behind. I haven't checked any use. The desert heat in Phoenix shimmered off the pavement as I carried the last box from my moving truck into the small ranch house I'd just purchased in a quiet neighborhood near Camelback Mountain. After months of apartment hunting following my job transfer from Seattle, I'd finally found the perfect place, an affordable, decent neighborhood, and close enough to my new office that I could bike to work. Everything felt like a fresh start, exactly what I needed after a difficult divorce. That's when I heard it, a soft thud on my front porch, followed by the sound of a vehicle driving away quickly. I hadn't been expecting any deliveries, and the moving company had already finished unloading everything. When I opened the door, I found a small package addressed to Miguel Santos at my address, with no return label, and a shipping sticker that looked oddly generic. As I stood in my doorway holding the package, I noticed a dark sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there minutes before. The driver's window was tinted, but I could see the outline of someone sitting inside, watching my house with the patience of someone who had specific business to conduct. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm a 34-year-old accountant who'd moved to Phoenix in September 2023 for a fresh start with a new firm downtown. The house was a 1960s ranch style in a working-class neighborhood, nothing fancy but clean and well-maintained by the previous owners who'd moved to a retirement community in Tucson. What I hadn't known when I bought the house was that the previous owner, according to neighbors, had been somewhat reclusive, an elderly man named Frank Peterson, who'd lived there for 30 years, rarely spoke to anyone, and had died suddenly of a heart attack 6 months before I purchased the property. The first package seemed innocent enough, probably a delivery mistake that would sort itself out once I contacted the shipping company. But when I called the number on the label, I reached a disconnected line. The shipping company logo looked official, but when I searched online, no such company seemed to exist. I set the package aside and focused on unpacking, but over the next 3 days, more packages arrived, all addressed to different names. Carlos Ruiz, Maria Gonzalez, David Kim, but all delivered to my address. The packages were small, usually about the size of a shoebox, and they were surprisingly heavy for their dimensions. Each time a package arrived, I noticed the same dark sedan parked nearby, sometimes across the street, sometimes a few houses down, different times of day, but always with someone inside watching my house. When I tried to approach the car, it would drive away before I could get close enough to see the license plate clearly. On my 4th day in the house, I decided to open one of the packages. Inside, wrapped in multiple layers of plastic, I found what looked like small electronic devices, circuit boards, batteries, and components I didn't recognize. Nothing illegal that I could identify, but definitely not the kind of items you'd normally ship to a residential address. That evening, as I was cooking dinner, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in their 30s, both wearing expensive clothes that seemed out of place in my middle-class neighborhood. Something about their posture, alert, aggressive, constantly scanning their surroundings, made my skin crawl. "We're here for our package," the taller one said when I opened the door with the chain still attached. "I think there's been a mistake. The packages aren't addressed to me. We know exactly where our packages are supposed to be delivered," the shorter man replied, his voice carrying an edge of threat. "Miguel Santos, Carlos Ruiz, those are our business associates. This is their confirmed delivery address." I explained that I just moved in, that I didn't know anyone by those names, that the packages must be delivery errors. But their expressions grew more skeptical and hostile with each word. "Lady, we're not playing games here," the tall man said. "We've got $20,000 worth of merchandise sitting in your house. Either you hand it over, or we're going to assume you're trying to rip us off." $20,000? I looked at the small packages stacked on my kitchen counter with new understanding. These weren't random delivery mistakes. They were part of a criminal operation, and my house was apparently the designated pickup point. "I can give you the packages," I said. "Just take them and leave me alone." "It's not that simple anymore," the shorter man replied. "You've been in possession of our property for 4 days. You've opened at least one package. Either you're working with Peterson's people, or you're trying to steal from us." Peterson, the previous owner. They thought I was part of whatever operation he'd been running from this address. After they left with the packages, I called the police, but the officer who responded was skeptical. "No laws were broken that I can see," he said. "Someone received packages at their own address and picked them up. Unless you can prove the items were stolen or illegal, there's not much we can do." But the visits didn't stop. Over the next week, more packages arrived, and more dangerous-looking people came to collect them. Each group was convinced I was part of Peterson's operation, and my insistence that I was an innocent new homeowner only made them more suspicious. The situation escalated when I found someone had broken into my house while I was at work. Nothing valuable was stolen, but every room had been searched methodically. Drawers pulled out, furniture moved, even the contents of my refrigerator rearranged. They were looking for something specific. That night, I decided to research Frank Peterson more thoroughly. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Peterson had been arrested twice for receiving stolen goods. Both charges dropped due to insufficient evidence. Neighbors described him as having frequent visitors at odd hours, packages delivered constantly, and an unusual amount of cash for someone on Social Security. My house had been the center of a fencing operation for years, and the criminal network Peterson had worked with assumed I'd taken over his role. The breaking point came on a Friday night when I was woken by the sound of my front door being kicked in. 4 men entered my house, moving with the efficiency of people who'd done this before. I grabbed my phone and locked myself in the bedroom, calling 911 while they searched the rest of the house. "We know you've got Peterson's stash," one of them shouted through the bedroom door. "He was holding 50 grand worth of our merchandise when he died." Where is it? I realized with horrible clarity that Frank Peterson hadn't just been receiving packages. He'd been storing stolen goods for a network that was now coming to collect what they believed was rightfully theirs, and they thought I'd inherited both his business and his inventory. Police arrived within minutes, but the men had vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. The officer found evidence of forced entry and took my statement, but warned me that without witnesses or security footage, prosecution would be difficult. You need to consider relocating, he advised. These people obviously believe you have something that belongs to them. Until they're convinced otherwise, you're going to be a target. But relocating wasn't financially possible. I'd used my entire savings for the down payment on this house, and my new job required a 6-month commitment before I could transfer again. Instead, I decided to solve the problem myself. I researched Peterson's background more thoroughly and discovered he'd hidden a storage unit across town. Using information from his mail and old utility bills, I tracked down the facility and convinced the manager to let me check the unit Peterson had rented under a false name. Inside, I found exactly what the criminals were looking for: boxes of high-end electronics, jewelry, and other valuable items that were clearly stolen goods. I also found Peterson's records, detailing a network of thieves and fences operating across Arizona and Nevada. I turned everything over to the police, providing them with evidence of the entire operation. Within 2 weeks, they'd arrested 12 people connected to the theft ring, including the men who'd been harassing me. But the experience left me permanently changed. I installed a comprehensive security system, changed my phone number, and started varying my daily routines. Every unexpected visitor, every delivery truck, every unfamiliar car in the neighborhood triggered anxiety attacks. 6 months later, I thought I was finally safe. Then I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single photograph of my house, taken recently from across the street. On the back, someone had written, Peterson had other partners, other storage units, other debts. Thanks for the tip about his record, Sarah, because some criminal networks are larger and more patient than law enforcement realizes. When you eliminate one cell, another simply adapts and continues operating. And somewhere in Phoenix, people are still looking for Frank Peterson's missing merchandise, still convinced that his house holds secrets worth killing for. The next time you buy a house with an unusual history, remember that some previous owners leave behind more than just old paint and outdated fixtures. Sometimes they leave behind debts that the new owner is expected to pay. And sometimes the most dangerous thing about your new address isn't the neighborhood. It's the criminal network that considers your front porch their property. Because when you unknowingly move into someone else's crime scene, you don't just inherit their house, you inherit their enemies. Moving to Seattle was supposed to be a fresh start. New city, new high-paying tech job, and a beautiful new house in a quiet, leafy neighborhood. It was the culmination of 10 years of grinding. And as the last box was carried through the door, I felt a sense of profound accomplishment. The company I'd hired, Swift and Secure Movers, had been fantastic, professional, efficient, and their online reviews were glowing. The lead mover, a charismatic man named Marcus, shook my hand firmly. "Welcome to your new life, Mr. Davis," he said with a warm smile. That first night, surrounded by a fortress of cardboard boxes, I felt a deep, satisfying peace. I was working late, unpacking my home office when I heard it, a faint, sharp click coming from the direction of the front porch. It sounded like the shutter of a camera. I froze, my ears straining. The house was silent. I crept to the window and peered out into the dark, quiet street. Nothing but empty sidewalks and the soft glow of street lamps. It must have been the house settling, or a passing car. I was just tired. But the feeling of being watched lingered. I thought back to the movers. Marcus had been friendly, but his questions now seemed odd in retrospect. "You travel a lot for your work?" he'd asked while carefully wrapping my monitors. "This is a big house for one person. You must be planning on having family stay over soon." At the time, it felt like harmless small talk. Now, it felt like data collection. A cold knot began to form in my stomach. The next morning, I couldn't find the spare key I was certain I'd left on the kitchen counter for my parents' upcoming visit. I searched everywhere, but it was gone. I told myself I must have packed it in a box by mistake. It was the only explanation that didn't make my skin crawl. Over the next few days, as I unpacked, more unsettling details from moving day resurfaced. The movers had been almost too interested in my belongings. One of them had taken a photo of the serial number on my new OLED TV, saying it was for insurance purposes. Marcus had asked me detailed questions about my security system. "Oh, the XG350E," he had said, nodding with an appraising look. "Great system. A real pain to disable if you forget the code, though." It had sounded like a professional observation then. Now it sounded like a threat assessment. They weren't just moving boxes. They were taking a silent, meticulous inventory of my life. "That's a beautiful watch collection," one of them had remarked as they moved my dresser. "Must have taken years to build." They were cataloging me, and I paid them to do it. A week passed. The initial paranoia began to fade, replaced by the stress of starting a new job. I convinced myself I was overreacting, but one night, I came home late from the office and saw a dark sedan parked down the street. It looked like the one Marcus had driven when he came to give me the initial estimate. As I pulled into my driveway, the sedan's lights switched off, and it silently pulled away, disappearing around the corner. A coincidence. It had to be. The following evening I was home, trying to relax, when my phone rang. A blocked number. I answered, and was met with complete silence. No breathing, no background noise, just a heavy, empty void. After about 10 seconds, they hung up. I tried to tell myself it was a wrong number, a telemarketer's auto dialer, but I knew it wasn't. It was a test to see if I was home. The dread returned, heavier this time. I felt like a bug under a microscope. I checked the locks on my doors and windows 3 times before going to bed. Was I going crazy, or was I just now realizing the danger I had been in all along? The climax of my paranoia came 2 nights later. I got home from a long day at work, the house dark and quiet. I unlocked the front door, disarmed the security system, and stepped inside. Everything looked normal, but the air was wrong. Colder, stiller. A drawer in the hallway console table was open, just by an inch. I never left it up. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I walked into my home office. My work laptop and my personal tablet were gone. I ran to my bedroom closet, where I kept a small, fireproof safe with my watch collection and important documents. The safe wasn't broken into. It was simply gone. I stumbled back into the living room, my mind reeling. The TV, the high-end sound system, the collection of rare books I'd spent years acquiring, all vanished. But there was no mess, no broken glass, no drawers ransacked. The thieves had moved with the same surgical precision as the movers had. They knew exactly what to take and what to leave. They hadn't forced their way in, they had let themselves in. The horrifying truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. The spare key, the security code, the inventory. It wasn't a burglary. It was a scheduled pickup. The police were sympathetic, but baffled. There were no signs of forced entry. An officer took my statement, his face a mask of professional concern. I told him about swift and secure movers. He typed the name into his patrol car's computer. The website had been taken down. The phone number was disconnected. The business address I'd listed was a up-store mailbox, which had been closed a week prior. "We've seen this before," the officer said, his voice grim. "A new kind of crew. Sophisticated. They set up a convincing front, get dozens of fake 5-star reviews, and target people relocating. You're at your most vulnerable. You're trusting. And you've already done them the favor of putting all your valuables in neat little boxes." The violation was absolute. It wasn't just the loss of my things. It was the theft of my security, the realization that the foundation of my new life was a carefully constructed lie. The friendly smiles of the movers now played in my mind as monstrous, predatory leers. I'm trying to rebuild. I've installed a new top-of-the-line security system. I had the locks changed twice. I don't trust anyone. My new life in Seattle is a fortress of paranoia. Yesterday, a small padded envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single glossy photograph. It was a picture of my grandfather's vintage watch, the one I cherished most, the one I hadn't even reported stolen. because the pain of its loss was too personal. Taped to the back of the photo was a small typed label. It read, Item #74, catalogued. Below it was a postscript. P.S. The new security system looks impressive. We'll enjoy the challenge. The house in Austin was my victory lap. After years of living in cramped apartments, I'd finally bought a home. A sleek, modern marvel of technology, where everything from the lights to the locks could be controlled from my phone. The previous owner, a tech developer named Kevin, had walked me through the system. The house learns from you, he'd said with a proud, geeky smile. It's designed to anticipate your every need. For the first week, it was magical. The coffee pot would start brewing the moment my morning alarm went off. The lights would dim perfectly when I sat down to watch a movie. I felt like I was living in the future. The first glitch happened on a quiet Tuesday night. I was washing dishes, humming an obscure song from an indie band I loved. Suddenly, the smart speaker in the living room crackled to life, playing that exact song. I froze, soap suds dripping from my hands. It was a bizarre coincidence, but I laughed it off. The system was just that good, I told myself. It was learning. But then the glitches became more frequent and more unsettling. I'd come home to find the thermostat cranked up to a sweltering 90 degrees. The lights in the bedroom would flicker on and off in the middle of the night, pulling me from a deep sleep. One morning, I was getting ready for work when the smart lock on the front door disengaged with a loud click, then immediately locked again. Each time, I'd reset the system, blaming buggy software and the quirks of a new house. But a cold, persistent feeling of being watched started to take root. The sleek, minimalist smart cameras mounted in the corners of each room, once a symbol of security, now felt like unblinking eyes. The house was no longer anticipating my needs. It felt like it was playing with me. One evening, I was on a stressful call with my boss, pacing back and forth in my living room. As I complained about my workload, the smart TV suddenly turned on, the volume blasting. The show, a documentary about corporate burnout. I slammed the TV off, my heart racing. It wasn't funny anymore. The turning point came when the security system, which I had programmed to be inactive when I was home, sent an email to my phone. The subject line was motion detected, front porch. I opened it to find a photo of my own front door, timestamped just a minute earlier. But in the photo, the door was slightly ajar. I looked at the front door from my spot on the couch. It was closed and locked. I knew, with a certainty that made me feel sick, that I hadn't opened it. Someone was manipulating not just my home, but my reality. That night, I went around the house and covered every camera lens I could find with blue painter's tape. The paranoia was a physical weight, a constant pressure in my chest. Was I losing my mind? Was this all in my head? I felt like a prisoner in my own home, a home that was actively working against me. The climax arrived on a Friday. I was on a video conference call with my team, my laptop open on the kitchen island. In the middle of my presentation, my webcam feed froze. Then, for a split second, it switched. Instead of my own face, my screen showed a live feed of me from a different angle, from across the room, as if filmed from the smart camera I had covered with tape. But in the video, there was no tape on the lens. The feed switched back to my webcam before anyone else on the call could notice, but I had seen it. A raw, visceral terror seized me. He was watching me. Right now, I ended the call abruptly, mumbling an excuse about a bad connection. I called my friend Sarah, a cybersecurity expert, my voice a choked, trembling whisper. "Someone's in my network," I managed to say. "They're in my house." For the next hour, Sarah walked me through a deep scan of my home network, and we found it. A ghost network, encrypted and hidden, running parallel to my own. It had backdoors into every single smart device, from the thermostat to the cameras. It was a digital skeleton key to my entire life. As Sarah worked to shut it down, I found the data storage, folders, labeled with dates and room names going back to the day I moved in. Living room 612, bedroom 613. Inside were hours and hours of video files, footage of me sleeping, eating, talking on the phone, crying in frustration, intimate private moments, all cataloged and saved. The previous owner, Kevin, hadn't just sold me a house. He had sold me a cage and kept the key. The last folder was labeled Live Feed 715. Today's date. My blood ran cold. He knew I had found him. As if on cue, a notification popped up on my phone's home control app. The icon for the front door smart lock, which had been a solid reassuring green, turned red. The text below it changed from locked to unlocked. I didn't scream. I didn't wait. I grabbed my car keys and ran out the back door, not stopping until I was in my car, speeding away from the house that had become my own personal prison. The police investigation was a chilling confirmation of my fears. Kevin was a new breed of predator, a digital landlord who never let go of his properties. He built and sold 3 other smart homes in the Austin area, all with the same hidden backdoors. He wasn't just stalking his victims. He was selling the intimate footage on the dark web. He had a small devoted following who paid to watch the lives of unsuspecting people unfold, to watch their confusion turn to fear. Kevin vanished. By the time the police raided his apartment, he was long gone, his hard drives wiped clean. I live in an old dumb apartment now, one with a deadbolt and no Wi-Fi connected devices. I check the locks 3 times before I go to sleep. I cover my laptop camera with a piece of tape. The feeling of being watched has never truly left me. Yesterday, a package arrived. It was a brand new smart speaker, the latest model. It was a welcome gift from my new internet service provider. Attached to the box was a small, neatly printed gift note. Couldn't help but notice you were having some network issues. Thought this might help you feel more connected. Best KK.